Welcome to Corrections Unfiltered, the podcast where corrections meets conversation. I'm your host, Pete Bloodworth, and each episode we dive deep into the real stories, challenges, and the perspectives of those who work in the unforgotten field of corrections. This is a place where we have open discussions, unfiltered dialogue, and we talk about the people and the issues that are overlooked sometimes in our field. So let's get into this today. Luckily, we have a full cast, it looks like. We have Charlie Bueno. Charlie, say hello.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here.
Mr. Rick Harns.
Yes, sir. Right here.
And last but never not least, we have Mr. Chris McConnell. How you doing, sir?
Hey, how's everybody doing?
So we were discussing something in between the first episode and this one, and it got into a really good conversation. So we thought, hey, let's hold off a little bit. Let's start talking about this because we think we can really have a good dialogue. So we were talking about the challenges that corrections people have, especially when they're newer in the field or whatever, and they have an inmate who has an agenda, and he wants to start that agenda by capturing their attention when they're in their cell, and they start becoming disruptive. A lot of times there's been some names for them like bar warrior, door warrior, window warrior, things of that nature. But there truly is a way to manage them, and I think as this happens more and more to people in corrections, they find that way of handling it. And so, Rick, you were talking about that you had kind of broke it down a little bit. You want to go ahead and start us off?
Sure. Really interesting subject. Feel like it's got a lot of avenues, but one of the things that I always remember is when I got into corrections, and of course, and let me preface this by cell door warriors, especially inmate cell door warriors, because there's also staff cell door warriors. Depending on the level that you're at, whatever title you carry, you're gonna be addressed in a different way. There's going to be a different program going on. There's different goals going on from the person on the other side of the door. But for the inmates, to me, in my mind, broke it down in the special housing unit, the lockdown unit inmates, and the general population. General population inmates, I always felt like they're the guys that are while your doors are locked, secured, they're trying to agitate or get something going, and usually to me it was a ploy to get locked up so that they could be save face in the unit and get placed in the special housing unit before the doors opened in the morning or after the 4 o'clock count or the afternoon count to make sure that they don't get stabbed up, whatever they've been threatened with. Rather than say, hey, CO, I need to get out of the unit, they can start up with a rather robust rhetoric with you, and get themselves taken out of the unit and save some kind of face. And then, of course, there's the special housing unit inmates who are secured behind the door, and the word secured is they feel secure too, and they're trying to get a reaction out of you so that you make mistakes, or that they can get the other inmates on the range in some sort of a lather and entertain themselves. It could be anything from mind games to entertaining themselves. For a new staff member, I think it's important for new staff to understand that it is prison work as a whole is there's a lot of psychology going on. Even though you may not have a degree in psychology, you're going to learn psychology working inside a prison, and cell door warriors is one of the things that is one of the biggest obstacles. It's hard for a lot of people to wrap their mind around and not get drawn into the situation and to where you make the mistakes of opening the door you shouldn't open, not only compromising your safety, but compromising the security of the institution, or letting it get into your head to where you make mistakes down the road, or you turn a situation where an inmate's trying to draw you into something and make it into a personal situation, which could blow over into the rest of the institution. So I'll leave it at that for now. Just kind of, that's my spin on it, and think hopefully that gets things going.
Chris?
Yeah, let me start out by saying, like, prisons are, communities, and they're rife with inmate code and jargon and, prison talk. It's, inmates use this kind of talk to save time and maybe conceal the meaning from correctional officers. So you hear the word door warrior, cell warrior. I've heard it called cell gangster. It's one of those words inmates use. So for the ones listening out there, our audience listening out there, what is a door warrior? A door warrior is an inmate who acts tough and intimidating when confined to their cell, but becomes meek and submissive when out in the open or interacting with others. The term highlights the contrast between an inmate's behavior when, protected by that physical barrier of their cell versus their behavior in a more vulnerable, face-to-face type encounter. And a great example is, probably most of us have seen this. There's a video on Facebook of two dogs, and they're on each side of the gate.
Oh,
And they're both snarling at each other and barking and growling. Their teeth are showing. And then they slide the gate, and both dogs just sit there and look at each other, and they're non-aggressive whatsoever. And then they slide the gate back, and they go right back to barking and growling and showing their teeth. Now that case, that's a dog warrior. But in our case, we're talking about door warriors, but same concept.
yeah. So so Charlie, you ever had to deal with something like that?
Yeah, it's like we talked about earlier. When you get into corrections, you're running head on with a lot of stuff, and that's one of the things that a lot of people struggle with, and myself struggled with that from the beginning. But I think you deal with that in your kind of your own way, and I think it depends on what where you're at in the facility, whether you're an officer, counselor, or a captain. You kind of get your own feel for it. And in my case, working in the step down unit, I had the ability, I talked to each inmate on a weekly basis. So when they were in there doing their little, rant in there and the cell warrior deal was going on, or like I said, whatever term you wanted to use, there would be times when I'd pull them one-on-one when I was talking to them, kind of feel them out. You were acting up the other day. Give them a chance to give an opportunity to them to explain why they were doing it, or they were that's just the way they are. They're trying, like I said, they're trying to either check in, get out of the unit for some reason because they owe, or like you said, getting stabbed up. I mean, there's a lot of reasons behind it, but like you said, there's just that is just such a wide open thing that goes on. I think you're going to deal with that how you feel you should deal with it at the time, and there's a lot behind that. But
That's what I want to start talking about. We start going down the road a little bit as far as when they start to behavior, they start acting out. Do you suppose they pick and choose when they do that?
Oh, sure. If how they read those officers and those captains and those counselors and the wardens. If you come in and you're receptive, they're going to key on you because they know they can act up on you. Some act a little more. Officer will be a little more aggressive. I'll go to the door and right to the door and try and talk to them first.
It's great to hear the different perspectives. Mine, I got to dig out of the cobwebs. But everybody gets it at a different level. We've all done rounds in the lockdown unit, and when you're an officer working the lockdown unit, you're going to get a lot different lip service than you're going to get as the captain or the associate warden or the warden. And it's motivated by completely different things. Unfortunately, the lower you are on the status level, when you're the officer working the unit, whether it be a lockdown or a GP unit, you're gonna get the worst end of it, and it's one of those things that. It seems benign, and it does become a normal thing, but it's very dangerous too, because if you don't read the signals right, you're either gonna ignore it and you roll the doors, and the next thing you know, you got a guy, getting stabbed up, and that's a problem. Or you fall for whatever the ruse is and do something maybe even more stupid, more that compromises the unit. There's I always feel like every time somebody tells me something, there's something behind it, and whether it's just they just want to shoot the bobo, or they're trying to elicit a reaction. You analyze it a little bit, and I always go back to, this is a very this is a business that where it's a mind game. And one of the things that, when we were talking about going into this, was also, and I think Charlie brought it up, is how this kind of job, how it affects you in your personal life. Do you take it home, and to what level do you take it home? And I kind of think it marries this subject kind of marries together with that, because it is especially when you're new, as you get more seasoned, and you cut your teeth, and you know the inmate population knows you, that sort of thing. Things change, they settle down, but it does kind of marry into where you're playing this game, a very dangerous game, inside of a place you only go work maybe 8, 16 hours a day. These guys live there 24 hours a day.
And I think, a lot of these guys, when they're doing that, they're trying to figure it out and to fit their agenda, also because they realize they got to live with the inmates after they're done doing this thing. And so sometimes they'll wait till the chow is done, the rec is done, showers are done, whatever. In my opinion, there will be times when it's that specific officer. They want to get in underneath this guy's skin. And you were talking about, the experience that you gain when you start out. Your skin's very thin. Later on, your alligator skin, your double alligator. But at the beginning, they know how to dig in there and get it. So Chris, what do you got on that, as far as, like, the newer officer has to deal with it, the emotions that are going on, and what the agenda is of the inmate?
Well, I just wrote it down. I said, number one, you have to have thick skin. It's the old sticks and stones,
Yeah.
concept. Believe it or not, maybe people fail to realize is these inmates, they're a huge, huge management problem. First, generally, they're already in protective custody, or like Rick said, they're in GP trying to get into protective custody or a special housing unit. And protective custody simply means that they have to be separated from inmates in general population.
Right.
So what does that mean? That means there's already some type of threat against them. And now you add the fact that they're verbally disrespectful to other inmates. Verbal disrespect in a penitentiary will get you seriously assaulted or killed, period. So now you have to find the right cellmate for a door warrior. That's challenging. You have to find the right person that is in the same status, such as, again, protective custody. These door warriors, again, huge management problem.
They're digging into that emotions, and if you, especially, you take the seg setting, you take the general population you're talking about, where they're just trying to get out of that population to a safer place that they feel they can be in seg. You've got them in seg who are lighting up the place because they want to make sure they don't go to rec. I guess it's the specific people who might be in that segregation unit, especially when you have your larger seg units with hundreds of inmates inside there. So there's all these agendas that they've got going on to do this. And then you have the emotions of the employee that get involved. And like you were talking about earlier, Rick, with the different, they get into those feelings to the point where the decision making takes a turn. And okay, well, I'll open the food port if that'll calm you down. Oh, I mean, that's happened a lot, where the inmate says, just open the food port. That's all I need. And you open that food port. And then when they start running wreck or they start doing something, out comes something from that food port. But so when you're talking about that, what's the best option? an officer has if they begin to understand that their feelings are getting too involved in what's happening?
It's an experience thing. So, like we talked about, you're brand new. It's your skin is super thin, and it's hard to let that go. And hopefully you're working with people with more skin in the game, more experience that can guide you to the right answer. As you get more involved in the business, you tend to not ignore it, but not let it get ruffled, because you've got tasks to accomplish in
Mhm.
that. And there could be hundreds more inmates in that unit that you've got to handle. Not the guy that's trying to capture your attention for whatever reason.
You
My
know, and
my
Charlie, oh, I'm sorry.
what
I'm
my
sorry.
whole thing was, if there's not blood on the floor, if there's not something actively going on there, I'm not going to be bothered with it until I've got a handle on what's going on. They convey a threat to them, to somebody else or myself or their cellie. That's one thing. But if they're bumping their gums, and my thing with especially inmates in lockdown units is, you can talk with me, you're not going to talk at me. If we're talking at me, we're done. And that usually would shut everything down and move on down the line. But if you're brand new, or you're somebody that just, let's face it, we've all worked with people that just probably shouldn't have got past the interview process. They just aren't wired right for the job. And then they're in there, and they will fall for every ruse and amplify the situation. And that's, I think Chris touched on that. That turns into a big problem in an institution.
So Charlie, we were talking before we started the recording about the fact that you joined in this fun corrections game later on in your years. So you had thick skin developed in certain areas, but did you find it challenging when the inmates started doing these types of behaviors in the cell, and you're newer to corrections on how to go about managing this or handling these guys?
Absolutely. In for people that are listening to this podcast, you'll hear me throughout our conversations. There'll be some things that I'll say over and over again, and the other one is, some of the things is, I take things when an inmate comes at me through a door, in front of a door, wherever, seriously. You have to think that this is real. Your head's on a swivel. This could happen, because if they crack that door, he could come out of that door, or she could come out of that door, and then it's game on.
Yeah.
So yes, it took you a little bit of time to realize, and then you have to make that in your mind. Okay, this is what they're going to say to me.
Mhm.
And you have to let it roll off your back, because if you start taking it seriously, you're going to take it home with you, and it's going to affect you.
So one thing I used to always tell everybody when they started out is, if you begin to get into your emotions, you need to do what? Call your supervisor.
This is where, when I sit here and talk to you guys, it's where I think about your experiences have gone for the 30 years, and my experiences have only been 10. That's when, if I have a problem and I look above me, captain, lieutenant, assistant warden, that's where your seasoning and your thick skin help me. To where, like you said, if I'm having a problem with somebody and I'm at my wit's end, I'm unsure what to do, I'm going to call somebody higher than me that I know I can rely on, that, I have a faith in, that they're going to guide me in the right direction. And that's huge.
I
That's
tell you,
huge.
because I know I learned that so much, because I went from a low level facility to a supermax, and overnight the difference that was there. And it was one of those things where we had to work as a team, that if you started getting lit up, the inmates started getting in your feelings, and your other staff could see it. They had to figure out a way to intervene and let you know, like, hey, it's time for you to step either away or completely step out. Just get out of the pod, get out of the unit, do whatever you got to do. You're not going to be in here because these guys have got your number at the time. Go relax. Chris, what do you got on it?
Yeah, I was just going to kind of echo what everyone else said, and if you have a door warrior that's specifically targeting, a staff member, and they know they can get under their skin or whatever, and that's where the seasoned officers come in. That's where the OJT comes in, the on the job training. Hey, pay no mind to him. This is what he does. Remember, without an audience, there's no need to perform.
Right.
And I always say too, if the way you think you're going to handle it is personal versus professional, you're going to be wrong.
Great
So
point.
I always try to, even as a staff member, I always say, is this personal, or is my decision professional or personal? And if it's personal, you're going to lose every time.
Yeah.
You got to keep it professional.
And
Absolutely.
there's no it's not a bad thing if you're seasoned enough to know if you're having a problem with somebody to step out of the pod and let somebody else handle the situation. You're in essence diffusing it just from you leaving. That to me is seasoned maturity, knowing your worth, and again, and you'll hear me say it. If it wasn't for the people above me guiding me, I mean, how else are you going to know how to do these things?
And the thing is, when
Experience.
it's happening to you, is running through your mind. You're trying to figure out what is the agenda, what is the goal, what they're trying to meet, because it's this myriad of possibilities. How'd you narrow it down, Rick? What was it? I mean, I know that you knew your inmates over a period of time. You got to know everybody, but when they started doing these things, what did you go through to try to narrow down? Like, what's the agenda, and how do I handle it from here?
Yeah, it's tough. But like I said, going back through, if at a captain level, it was very easy to figure out. You've heard it 100 times, but you never want to discount any of them. I always go back to the guy, the gal, whatever is just starting out and what they're going through. And the only thing I would say is, I never would want the staff member to have to leave a unit for an inmate. I want to figure out where the problem is with the inmate and neutralize that issue. And like Chris was saying, they're all important. You want to pay attention to what you're doing. You don't want to discount anything. Is it a check-in move? Is it a real threat? A guy threatening them when the door opens, I'm taking you off the count, CO. That's a serious issue, and it's not just a check-in move. So trying to whittle through all that. And if it's a lockdown unit, like I remember as brand new, we were so short-staffed. Very quickly, I ended up in a lockdown unit, and it's a whole different game in the lockdown unit. The inmates are like Chris said, they're already on PC status. They're already locked up for either some sort of misconduct or because they're not safe out in general pop, and they're emboldened by the fact that there's this door that they know you're not supposed to open up, without certain restrictions in place. It was helpful for me to, and I say it again over and over. I'm glad I started out in the place I started out at, because the staff around me they knew the inmates, and they said, this is that guy does that all the time, or that's unusual for this guy. So now we're gonna take a look-see at this and make sure, because that's odd behavior for that person. Having people, Charlie touched on it, having people around that could guide and help out that situation, because we're not in there alone. None of us have worked in an institution and we're the only person there,
Right.
Unless it's a camp, I guess, but you've got people around, you got resources around. Staff always fall into a problem when they think that they're the toughest guy on the compound, that they gotta prove themselves in some sort of gladiator school. Right. We're not they have to remember that we're not the performers there. We're not there as part of the enemy. We're here just keeping them inside the fence and making sure they don't kill each other and kill us. We're not participants in the gladiator school. If they want to do that and they go out in the rec yard and it's a Donnybrook out there, that's we're not participants in that ever. We have all the resources, we have the other staff to tap into, and it's not personal. If you're letting it get personal, I gotta pass the baton on to Pete and say, hey Pete, I gotta, not leave the unit, but just, I can't be the lead on this, because you get in your head. You can't help it. It's a human thing. You get in your head.
What I used to do too is I used to walk. They're doing their thing, saying their stuff. And I used to kind of just look around the pod, maybe walk a few cells down, maybe a few more if I can, and see what the other guys are saying or doing. And are they banging on their doors? Are they banging on their windows? Are they yelling stuff? Are they joining in? Are they helping instigate? So, Chris, do you think that kind of gives you an indicator of what kind of support this person has?
Oh yeah, and if I could, I'd like to kind of give an example and perhaps maybe even a funny story. When I was a special housing unit lieutenant, we had this inmate. We'll say his last name was McCracken, and he was the epitome of a door warrior, but in this case, toward other inmates, not toward staff, toward other inmates. So he was small in stature, kind of weak in strength. He was not educated at all, and he had a loud mouth. And he was the type of inmate to lose a fight with himself, But he was very disruptive, and he was able to rile up a range. And he would use, racial slurs. He would say disrespectful things about what he would do sexually to someone's mother, wife, daughter, whatever. He would threaten the other inmates with violence. And for lack of a better term, the other inmates on the range, they'd get pissed off. They'd say, hey, Lieutenant, you need to do something about this dude. And for some unknown reason, and I don't know why to this day, this inmate respected the military. And I never checked, but he alleges he was in the military, something I highly doubt. Anyway, although unorthodox, I had a high amount of success of controlling him with military commands. And I apologize beforehand to any sergeants out there, but I would call him Sgt McCracken. So I would go into roll and I would walk up to his cell door. I would stand at the position of attention and I would look in his cell door window. Of course, he would walk over the door and he'd wait for my next command of execution. In true military fashion, I would yell, Sgt McCracken only, attention, hut, like that. And of course, he would, snap to what he thought was the position of attention. I would say something like, I am your commanding officer for today, and you will take all orders from me. Do you understand me? If so, sound off with a loud and thunderous, yes, sir. And he'd say, yes, sir. And I'd say, I'd tell him, I'll make rounds later, but until then, you will refrain from yelling and you will maintain military discipline. Do you understand me? Again, he'd say, yes, sir. And I'd say, you're dismissed. And I'd walk off. Now, that worked about 2/3 of the time. The other third of the time, all hell would break loose.
Okay, now,
Good one.
That was a great story.
Yeah,
that was a great story.
It's true.
So, yeah.
Charlie, I've been an operations lieutenant before and got called down to shoe to go into military role because of McCracken.
Okay. If that's what it takes, that's what we do.
This dude, I can't explain. It's an anomaly. I don't know.
Yeah. And now again, if you let's take a couple steps back, and you tell me if you agree with me or disagree, and I'm good with that. That all relates back to when you start corrections, knowing inmates, having a great rapport with them or not so great, depending on the situation. But that's where the training comes in. And you see how that all evolves to where how you remember how you feel the first time you diffuse something like that, when he came out of the cell and he was back there doing his thing and then walked out into the pod and he looked at you and he said nothing, because of your actions and what you did, like you said, not taking it personal, being professional. There's so much to say about that.
Yeah, I think that, and I think it's been said twice or more, is that although in the back of your mind you think there's an agenda and we're going to go through this to see where we go, you have to take it seriously, because the rest of the population is looking at you to see if you're taking it seriously. And if you start giving, giving indication that you're not taking it seriously, you might intrigue other people to start getting involved. Oh, he doesn't want to take him seriously. And that's why I was going back to, like, when I used to either walk a few cells or listen to what they were saying. If was anybody else joining in, my opinion, it's just my opinion. If nobody else was joining in, this guy was solo. This whole event was on his own. Chances, and everybody else probably wanted me to get it over with as fast as I could, so they can go back to sleep or doing their workout or doing whatever they were going to do in their cell if they couldn't pay, if they couldn't do it without paying attention to this guy. But if they were joining in, I want to know who's joining in, because that might indicate to me, how big of a problem this could be if they think that we're not taking it serious. So it's a real fine line, if you ask me, about the impression. And I think the times that I've seen where this has kind of gone in the wrong direction and we had a harder time recovering is when the inmates who probably wanted nothing to do with it thought we were not taking care or taking it seriously, and then that wound them up. And now instead of one problem, I got 3, 4, 5, 10 or more.
Yeah, you got to read the unit. Yeah, looks like Chris said last one. You got to be able to read a room, read a range. Read a chow hall, read a unit. And if if you got a, not that you have to give merit to everything, but where there's smoke, there's fire. And when you're hearing the same thing over and over again, and it's something. Their world is small. The smallest thing can be a big deal.
My thing is, if that officer on that in that area is able to calm them down and get it diffused. We talked about it, I think, Rick, and we were on your podcast, we were talking about, de-escalation is just the big thing. I mean, it's the way to go. And if they are able to use their skills and stuff to defuse it down, de-escalate it down, they still need to report that. Now, here's a controversial. I mean, it's controversial when I talk to other people about it. Do you write the inmate disciplinary reports for the behavior he exhibited, either by partially flooding or banging on his door or covering his window, doing the things that hindered you from performing your duties? Do you write disciplinary reports on it to hold them accountable?
That's a loaded gun right there.
Yeah, the book answer is yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do we write? I mean, everybody here. I know we didn't write incident reports for everything that happened. The paper answer is, of course you do, because you're going to document their behavior. But to me, it was more important that I made sure that everybody knew what was going on. And within a lockdown unit, everybody knows who the usual players are. The ones you got the troublemakers, and then the ones that are just trying to get their rec, trying to get their commissary, trying to get their phone. So.
What say you, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, again, the paper answer is yes. Yeah, there's got to be some level of accountability for that type of behavior. I mean, if he's, if he's breaking the infractions, he's got to be held accountable. No officer that works like shoe, and generally, door warriors, cell warriors, whatever, it's mainly in shoe. No officer wants to have a bad shoe day. A bad shoe day is that day where the range is riled up. All the inmates are yelling and screaming, pounding on the door. I tell you, that's tough for staff. And that's a headache in the making. And then, you get off and you got to go home and you feel drained. You don't want that. You want to go to work, and, especially the shoe officers, go to work, do your thing, hand out your supplies, do your rec, call it a day. They don't want some door warrior riling all the inmates up. And, certainly they want you to handle it, and most of the staff are able to handle it, but it gets to the point, to put it on paper, to hold them accountable, to start, taking away what little liberties they still have, what little incentives they still have, commissary, whatever. It's worth it.
Well, okay, so I want to pose it this way, and here's why I became a believer in you document it on disciplinary reports, because the vast majority of it, you'll probably never hear of it again. You probably never will. But when the inmate sues and says that he was being abused, when the inmate files lawsuits for whatever mistreatment he says he's getting, and you go down the road of saying, but this inmate has exhibited disruptive behavior over a period of time, the first thing you have to do is show them the disciplinary reports that were written on this guy to document he did that, or like whatever system that they use for reporting major incidents so they can record those. And if you don't have the disciplinary reports, we all know, then that means it didn't happen. Because it's going to happen, what, a year, 2, 3 years down the road when you have to prove, hey, Bobby over here has been causing all these problems, and that's why we're holding Bobby accountable now to this level. I want him transferred. I want him up. I want his classification moved up. I want him going to a different level facility and all those types of things. And that's when those disciplinary reports that were never written are so important to me. And I understand, because you want to, it's like that, and just about every agency that I've been associated with, within the disciplinary process, it will say that it's supposed to be, there's an exact word for it, I'm just not able to gather it right now, progressive, but that the officer has discretion. And that's the first thing they whip out on me and say, well, I have the discretion. You do have the discretion, and I get that. However, certain behaviors, setting a fire, breaking a fire sprinkler, flooding the cell, and that for endangers others because you have to shut your suppression system down from potential fire. Those types of things are what we are going to write up. Now, Bobby said some harsh words to you and you want to work with that with Bobby, I'll let you do that. But next time this happens again, I'm going to expect to see some paper because Bobby didn't catch it when you tried your progressive discipline and you tried to manage it yourself. So I became that guy because I started seeing more and more times where inmates were using the fact that I did not have disciplinary reports for this consistent disruptive behavior as ways to get out of that transfer or his classification going up or whatever, or a lawsuit if they put one on us. So what are your thoughts on that?
And the thing there too is, and this is what I continuously heard was, and I had to explain it kind of the way you did, just because when you write them up, you may not know, you may never hear the punishment. For some reason, whether you're in another unit and this is what an officer would tell me. Why would you write them up? They're not going to do anything to them. And there you are explaining it. You're kind of building a case.
And
so when it comes time, you have the ammunition to back up your reprimand.
And see, to me, though, that's where you get with the DHO. And I know, we don't, as wardens, we don't get the chance to influence the DHO, that they're a free thinker. They get to do that kind of thing. At least that's been my experience with all the agencies I've been associated with. However, that DHO then can use the discretion to either lessen the charge, lessen the sanctions, and that type of thing for the disruptive behavior. Or generally, the review committee can make decisions. Well, he did these things and he got 30 days disciplinary. We're going to cut it at 18 because he seems like he's getting along with the program now. Because in those meetings, generally you have psychology and you have other people available who don't see it just from your perspective, who are telling you, is Bobby getting the message and is he behaving better? Is he med compliant? Is he doing all these other things? So that's why I really became the advocate of write them up. The DHO will handle it, and then we'll handle it on the other side of that DHO. But at least whenever things take place and I have to defend why we want to do what we want to do, I've got the documentation to prove it.
It's a good point. With the inmate's disciplinary record, that follows them. That follows them everywhere, and it can hurt them or it can help them. Yeah. First step back, parole, early release. What are they going to do? They're going to look at your disciplinary record. What if he was released and reoffended and came back in? His disciplinary record will be able, the staff will have access to his disciplinary record. So they'll be able to see what kind of inmate he was maybe years ago. The next institution, if he transfers, when you get a new inmate, the only thing we can really go off of is his disciplinary record. And, perhaps maybe his pre-sentence investigation, we could read that, find out a little bit about this guy, but his disciplinary record is going to be what staff lean on the most to kind of get a feel of how this inmate's doing his time.
So Rick, do you think that setting up letting your staff know the whole process, because I believe that is where I had to get better as a leader, was I needed to go and explain to everybody, hey, this isn't you by yourself. Like I think you were talking about, or Chris was talking, you're not on an island by yourself. When you do these things, a whole team of people get involved. The DHO is going to hear the disciplinary. They're going to decide the sanctions. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. We're going to take things away, give things back, time and seg. Do you think that that's a holistic approach, and explain that to the staff might make a difference in when they see this happening, that they know how to handle it better?
Well, it's like we've said over and over again, training, and Charlie touched on it, and I remember as a CO thinking the same thing. Why write a report? It's not going anywhere. Nothing happens. But staff at level that you're writing incident reports. You're a new CO, or it's your first couple of years. You write a report. Write the report and forget about it, because it's none of your business what happens with it, how it's adjudicated. But Pete brings up the best point, is that there's a bigger picture. This is we're developing a paper trail. If this is a isolated incident with this, with Billy, that's one thing. But if it's a habitual problem for Billy, then you develop this paper trail. And just because the lieutenant doesn't go down there and slap handcuffs on the guy and take him to seg, doesn't mean that it was forgotten about. It's logged in. It's a paper trail. So my point being that a lot of staff don't know how the system works, because they're not privy to it. And if they knew, maybe it would make more sense. And I know in the bureau, every year we would sit through a week of boring training, and a lot of that stuff is left out. And then when you go to the academy, and it used to be Glencoe, I don't know where it is now. They never would explain those. There's subtle things that go on that you should know, so that you know why you're doing things, instead of just saying write an incident report every time they do something and it just goes away. Staff lose sight of it, or they never had sight of it, and they just don't want to be bothered with it. But you lost that paper trail. And I know as an officer, I wrote very, very few incident reports in my time as an officer, and because we never saw anything happen.
Right.
But the point, we didn't know what was going on. And then when I got, once you make lieutenant and you're processing incident reports, or captain when you're seeing them and they're going to the DHO, then you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. So
Right.
it's kind of a training thing. It's or an awareness.
Yeah, I had to, like, generally the process is there's going to have to be an executive level or administrative level review of the disciplinary process to make sure that the facility leader believes that the disciplinary hearing officer is following through with what they want the intent of the disciplinary process to achieve. Are they
Right.
achieving what they're supposed to with the disciplinary process? And I got to where I would bring the staff in and let them say, here's what happened. You thought nothing happened. Nothing ever happens to my disciplinary report. Then I would bring him in. Oh, no, it did. Here it is. Here's the sanctions. Here's what he did. Here's what we're doing with it. Just like you're telling me that you get the leeway and you get some decision making and the severity of what you're going to write or things of that nature, we get certain leeway. The DHO does and the administration does, and how we manage that, because it's a management tool. It's all management. And I believe that if you cut that out, as much as I've seen it sometimes in the past, then the inmates feel as they can get away with so much more, because they've never been held accountable for it. And that accountability, in my opinion, also goes so much farther along with having them understand the necessity and the need to program and do the right things rather than the wrong things. Good attention versus, not good attention. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, and another thing too is inmates talk. Inmates talk. If there's a robust disciplinary process at a particular institution, the inmates are going to talk. Hey, you do that, man, you're going to get a ticket, and this is going to happen. They're going to take your commissary, restrict your visiting, this, that, and the other. On the other side, if you don't write the ticket, if you don't write the incident report, the inmates are going to say, man, you can do whatever you want. So, again, inmates are going to communicate what that particular institution, what that particular staff member does or does not do. So those type incidents that happen, those habitual incidents keep happening over and over and over. You want those,
those disciplinary reports, they came in so handy. But I do agree, yes, certain levels you let the officer manage that, but then he's got to let the DHO manage it, the other ones, and get that process going. Charlie, when you were dealing with that kind of stuff, when you called down and you said to your supervisor, "Hey, this guy's doing this. He's starting to flood. He's starting to this. He's starting whatever he's doing." What kind of support were you expecting to get from your supervisor?
More guidance, and the knowledge. I didn't want someone to come down and intervene, more or less, because I think that's just telling an inmate that I'm going to get an audience every time I act up. But yeah, I'm looking for, again, examples of just you gentlemen, somebody with experience more than I have, to just give me the guidance. I don't need somebody to come down and try and run the unit for me or handle the situation unless it warrants it. But I'm more, I want to take control of my unit or the wing or whatever I was in charge of. But when you get back to the report writing or the incident, when I went from the prison to the county jail, see, at the prison, that's what I got. You couldn't. Officers would be, they weren't punished. Well, when you went to the county jail, you knew the punishment. They told you what the punishment was. When you wrote an incident report, they told you what happened to that inmate. That made a big, huge impact. Yeah, I'm looking for somebody. If I'm in a sticky situation, I'm looking for somebody that's gonna help me. Guide me. I shouldn't say help.
Talk about, you talked about, sorry, Charlie, but you talked about, like, you're transparent, and this is why we do this, and this is why we do that, and we'll probably all agree that the staff should really kind of know how the process works, and the inmates are emboldened because they know that there is, whether it's a minor infraction or a major infraction, they're not held accountable. Inmates very quickly become emboldened. I go back to, it's like high school kids that have a teacher that let them do whatever. They can walk all over the teacher. Or worse yet, a principal that believes every complaint the kids make about a teacher, and the teacher gets no support at all. So,
and whether people realize it or not, that affects the whole institution.
Absolutely.
Some way or another, somewhere down the road, it's just like if you sweep it under the carpet, you're not getting rid of the problem. It's just going to escalate.
Spreads like wildfire. Yep.
Absolutely.
So as facility leaders, and did you, it's over with, the night's over with, we got a place calmed back down, everybody got a good night's sleep. Next day, we're starting to run our rec, we're starting to do whatever we're supposed to do. Did you do a follow-up with that inmate the next day or two to see what it was all about?
I always made that a point.
Yeah.
And again, that'll go back to rapport. That'll go back to the level that you're on with inmates. Those little things like that are the things I think that they that's when they remember you, and that you get that little bit of a grace with them. They'll kind of open up to you a little more, or maybe the words trust you a little more, because you're not going to lead them down a road and then you're just going to end it and it's over.
Yeah, I would usually ask, like, my security department leader, whatever they want to be called, whatever the title's called. I would ask them, hey, find out when that inmate's going to be on rec by themselves, or be at the health services, or alone, where you can have a conversation and just say, what the heck was that all about? Why'd you take us down this? Don't you realize? And I get it. There's a lot of inmates who know exactly what they did. They know exactly the circumstances. They were doing it for whatever their agenda was. But I still wanted to be able to sit back and know that conversation was had, because then the second time, third time, or fourth time, I can say, hey, we've talked to you about this when he was in a good mind. Mm-hmm. When he was in a good mindset. So that was something I kind of fell back on. And even me, even as a facility leader, if I had a chance to be alone with that person, I would have that conversation with them. I heard you had a bad night the other night. It wasn't a bad night for me. Well, you know what? Think about it. It was a bad night for you because all of this, and now you got disciplinary reports stacked up, and you're just, all these other things, and you're trying to get to make parole, or you're trying to make early release, or whatever the system might have for it. And look how you've affected things and stuff. So yeah, I learned to try to do a follow-up. That's what I try to do, or have someone do it.
I gotta break a second. You're not gonna believe this. I'm sitting here in my house, by the way. I mean, I'm not outside.
Right.
And I got a baby bunny.
Is that what we heard?
I got a bunny. He's crawling around on my floor.
Come on.
You guys didn't hear that? There's like a.
Yeah, I heard that. I thought it was somebody clicking a pen.
What the hell was going on? How the hell did it get in here? I got a Weimaraner dog. If my
It might be. I bet you don't. There aren't usually more than one baby. There's got to be a nest or something.
this is ridiculous.
Good training exercise for Chance.
Yeah.
How'd you get the name Chance for a dog?
Because we got him by chance. That's how we. That's literally why we. Mhm.
Oh, that's cool.
It just happened by chance. So we said, huh? Here, speaking of chance, here he is. How are you doing?
Is he getting the rabbit?
No, she locked him in here with me.
Whoa, Chance is a good size.
That's a good looking dog. Hey, here's my dog.
That's a hey partner.
Mine are outside.
Yeah,
Hey, partner.
she just got her nails done and her hair done today,
Oh, jeez.
didn't you?
Where's the other dog?
Looking sexy.
Oh, okay.
All right, get down. All right.
I know.
See,
Yeah,
this is great. We're gonna have to do bloopers now.
Yeah.
I hope you recorded this.
Mhm.
I got this last chunk of it. I got the introduction to Chance.
There you go.
And your bunny, and your little bunny.
That is
All right.
crazy.
So if we're winding this
by the time
baby
we talk
down-
again, you're gonna have a cage and a little feeder and
Oh
everything.
yeah.
I can tell you that. I can tell you,
Yeah, with a little drip bottle, exactly. Yeah.
like you said, good training.
That's a beautiful dog, though.
Yeah, he's cool.
We walked.
You know, we bought the bloodline. You know, you got to spend money to buy a bloodline. So
All right, so we're ready for
We got a custom dog. We got a 3-legged Chihuahua. So you just can't find those anywhere.
I got min pins.
What's
Oh yeah.
you call him tripod? What do you
Tripod, yeah. Oh yeah. He's got all kinds of names, man. Yeah. Now that's a handsome dog right there.
That's a dog.
Yeah.
Hey, tripod.
Oh, look at
There
him
you
licking,
go.
yeah. Good looking little
such-
fella.
That's such a good boy.
He's better than a bunny.
Yeah.
Not this new one I got.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, brother. He come in the room, man. He runs this house.
Well, hey, everybody, thanks for tuning to this episode of Corrections Unfiltered. We hope that today's conversation, sheds some light on some of the challenges and the realities that go on inside those facilities and what the staff members have to go through. We also would like to make sure that you know that we need to say this, gentlemen, we have hit 1,000 views on our very first episode.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And so remember, we had totaled it up. And we thought maybe with all of our family members, we'd hit 20. So that's a good thing. But we also want to make sure people understand, some of the challenges that go on behind the bars and behind the walls and what their staff members and the family members are going through. So if you don't mind, please hit that like and subscribe. Hit that share button. And you can share our conversation with other people. We want to grow this channel into something that, you want it to be and that what we want it to be. So please, by all means, get in the comments section and let us know. So Charlie, Chris, Rick, once again, it's always great to have you guys together and have this conversation. So we'll see you on the next one.
See you.
Thank you.